Hello, good evening, and welcome to History on Your Doorstep here on Bro Radio with me, Graham Loveluck-Edwards, on our brand new time slot on the fourth Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Wonderful to have you along today. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you today. We are going to be commemorating one of the greatest sons of the Vale of Glamorgan, a man who had influence right the way across Europe, who was one of the most well-known intellectuals of his day. He was not a politician, he was not a warrior, he was a missionary. So that might sound a little bit odd. How could a missionary be so significant? But please don't misunderstand how significant this man was. Because the chap we're talking about today was a man called Cadoc, also known as Cado, Cadog, Gattog. They're all the same person as far as we know. And his influence spread what was the known world. And if you're saying, well, is he that significant, really? Is he that important? I mean, you know, he lived roughly 1,500 years ago. But to this day, if you live in Cadoc, you're living in a town that was named after him. If you live in Llancarfan, then you're living on the remains of arguably one of his greatest achievements. And as I said, 1,500 years later, we're still naming schools, hospitals, streets, visitor centres, churches, you name it. We're still naming them after him. So his influence is still with us. So we're going to be investigating why that is. Who exactly was Cadoc? Why was his influence so enormous? What sort of things did he actually achieve? And how it is he's cropped up in the news headlines now in the modern world, only earlier on this year. So that's a lot of fun. So we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking a little bit later on about an event that is coming up this summer, which should excite all you listeners with an appetite for local history. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. But let's kick off with Cadoc, more latterly Saint Cadoc, and what it was that kind of made him the man he was. So let's go right back to the very beginning, because his family tree, quite apart from anything else, is absolutely extraordinary. So he lived between 497 and 580. That's where we believe his lifespan to have been. And in terms of how we know that, I'll be absolutely upfront with you right now. That period of history, also known as the Dark Ages, is one where there is not very much surviving written accounts of what was going on in any parts of Britain at that time. Having said that, there are more about the Vale of Glamorgan than most, because we had some pretty active clerics, people like Gildas the Wise, for example, who studied at the great University of St Illtyd in Llancarfan Major, who were particularly well educated. So we actually do have some written testimony about what was going on in those days. But most of what we know about Cadoc comes from a manuscript called Vitae Cadoci, which was written by a man called Llifris of Llancarfan. But that was actually written in the late 11th century. So we're more than 500 years after Cadoc has died. Do we have any kind of a thorough account of who he was and what he was all about and what he did? Pardon me. There's also another well-known manuscript, if you like, that mentions him and talks about him, and that's called the Welsh Saints, which interestingly is also the first historical document that ever mentioned there being King Arthur. There's nothing older than this reference to King Arthur. And that gives you an idea of how long ago this was going on. In fact, there's a theory that Sir Galahad, in the tales of King Arthur and the Round Table, the character of Sir Galahad is actually based on Saint Cadoc. So there we go. He's a major player. So what makes him such a major player? Let's take a look at his early life. And as I alluded to earlier, his family tree is absolutely remarkable. So let's start with his mother. Now, Cadoc's mother was a lady called Gladys, and she was a queen, and his whole bloodline on both sides of the family are royal. He is descended from a royal household. So, like I said, his mother was Gladys. She was known to be very beautiful, very desirable. One of the fairest of the children of a chap called King Brychan. Now, King Brychan is an extraordinary character. For a start, he was king of a kingdom called Brycheiniog, and as you're probably aware, that is the Welsh name for the Brecon Beacons. The Brecon Brycheiniog, and that's pretty much where his kingdom was. And the town Brecon is just an anglicised way of saying Brychan, because that's where King Brychan had his court. And now he was an extraordinary character for several reasons. Number one, he was a king. Number two, he was a saint. And all of his children, and he had lots of children, all of his children were saints as well. And when I say he had lots of children, let me elaborate on that. It depends where you look. There are some accounts that say 16. That's the lowest number, 16 children. Some say as many as 36, which is just absolutely extraordinary. And they include saints that we would have heard of, like Saint Dwynwen, for example, the patron saint of Welsh lovers, was one of his daughters. Saint Petroc, the patron saint of Cornwall, was one of his sons. So they're not like also-rans you've never heard of. You'll have heard of these people. But the reason why we have such a slender grip on how many children he really had is because in later history, people made up children. And there's a very good reason why this happened. So in the before the Tudor period, the medieval period, the only way you could ever rise socially is if you were already born to a noble family and you already had land and money and titles and all those sort of things. But in the Tudor period, there was the emergence of a merchant class and the birth of some form of social mobility. And once people who were from comparatively lowly backgrounds acquired wealth, the first thing they tried to do in order to make themselves more acceptable to their peer group was get sort of family trees drawn up that proved that they weren't really low-born at all, but they were actually descended from nobility. And King Brychan was a really, really popular character in the 16th century to claim you were descended from, especially if you were Welsh, if you were of Welsh nobility. Because for one thing, everyone had heard of King Brychan. He was a very famous character. He was also famous for being very fair and very wise and very pragmatic. So that endeared him to the chivalrous sort of fashions of the age. Also, of course, a saint and produced saintly children, and was also known to have lots of children. So the general thought was, well, if he's already known to have loads of children, no one's going to notice if I slip Auntie Mabel on the end and claim that she's descended from his direct line. To make me look altogether more posh. So people kept kind of adding children onto his line, which is why we end up with him supposedly having 36 children. Probably wasn't as many as that. Pretty confident he had a lot of children. Anyway, so the mother's side of Cadoc is this very famously wise king of Wales. Now, the father was quite different. He was royal, so straight away we can put that out there. He was a king, and his name was Gwynllew. Now, I'm not sure how this happened, but Gwynllew somehow got anglicised to Wallace. Normally when a Welsh name gets sort of anglicised, it's quite easy to see the roots, but I can't see how they went from Gwynllew to Wallace. Still, beyond me, wasn't my call. So anyway, Gwynllew, he was a king, but he was a very, very different king from Brychan. Gwynllew was a pagan warrior king. He was a pirate, he was a thug, And he was certainly not the sort of person I would imagine Brychan had in mind to be his future son-in-law. So when he came knocking and asked if he could have the hand of the fair Gwladys, he was turned away in no uncertain terms by Brychan. But being the sort of chap that he was, Gwynllw then returned with an army of 300 men, beat down the doors of the castle in Brecon, kidnapped Gladys and took her back to his castle and held her captive until Brychan would agree that they could be married. So that sounds like the beginning of a toxic relationship, doesn't it? For all we know, from accounts that are given of their relationship, they ended up being madly in love and having lots of children. And also we know in later history that Gwynllw sort of did mellow out a little bit and did slightly less of the piracy and of the warring. But not before time. We have an account, and there's so many wonderful legends about Cadoc. We've got a really grand account that after going on a 5-day drinking spree, that Gwynllw gave away Cadoc, his own son, gave him away in exchange for a cow so he could have some milk. Now, I'm no expert, but that doesn't sound like particularly good parenting to me. I'm quite concerned that this behaviour should not go unchecked. But apparently in later life, Cadoc managed to convert his father to Christianity, and Gwynllw, or Wullas, however you know him, ended up becoming Saint Wullas. And if there's any listeners from the Newport area, you will immediately recognise that name, because the cathedral in Newport is dedicated to St. Wullas. And the reason for that is he founded Newport. That's where his castle was. He kind of was the first person to create a settlement in Newport. And to this day, he is the patron saint of Newport. And he is also the patron saint of pirates. And I'm not making this up. He genuinely is the patron saint of pirates. And there's another account of him which goes to show how madly in love he was with his wife. So after Cadoc had converted him to Christianity, he went to a hermitage. So it was in early Christianity, having time on your own, far away from other people and from temptation and from even from food. These people would starve themselves. They'd go off into deserts and to pursue solitude. So he went on one of these retreats, and he could cope with being without everything except his beloved Gladys, and he kept sneaking off to run to her bed, apparently. So yeah, he may not be a model parent, but I think he had a heart deep down in there somewhere. Here's the weirdest thing I can tell you about. Well, there's quite a few actually. Here's one of the weirdest things I can tell you about Saint Wullas, or Saint Gwynllw, however you know him. During the Norman invasion at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, Norman soldiers claimed to have a vision that Saint Gwynllw was on the battlefield fighting alongside the Normans against Harold, the Saxon king, which has got all sorts of hidden imagery in it. I mean, for one thing, there's always this thing that the early Welsh saints were here long before the Saxons even became Christian. So there's a slightly older precedent here, which is on my side, saying I should be king. So there's a little bit of that going on. There's a little bit of politics going on. But what's quite interesting is after he became William I of England, King of England, William the Conqueror went on a pilgrimage which ended in St. David's in Pembrokeshire, but he stopped in Newport to give thanks to St. Wullas for fighting on his behalf at the Battle of Hastings. So there we go. So yeah, you've got quite a remarkable family tree. I mean, we haven't even started talking about Cadog yet. We're just scratching the surface with his mad father. and his mother and her incredible line of saints and all her saintly, and also, by the way, all of his brothers and he had he had three siblings, and all of those were saints as well. So yeah, quite an extraordinary family. Now we're a bit more engaged with the man himself and what it was that he did. So let's cut to the chase and talk about the thing that he's best known for. He built an abbey in the village of Llancarfan, and not just the church, but pretty much the whole village is built on top of this monastery, because it was vast. According to the Vitae Codici, it was like a city, really. It was a really, really large institution, and we know from what we know of this sort of institution, this was what historians describe as the Celtic Church, because Christianity had sort of grown up in pockets all across Europe in slightly different ways with slightly different interpretations. So, for example, Christians who went to the Celtic Church had a different idea of when Easter was to people who might have gone to church in France, for example. So it did have its nuances and differences. One of the differences was the sort of monasteries that these institutions used to have. Now, if you think about the European model, things like the Augustine order and things like that, they tended to be only men. They would have vows of silence and chastity, and they would live in solitude. The sort of things that we had in the Celtic Church, it wasn't men, it was men and women. And quite often you'd have very strong female characters, such as St. Bridget of Kildare, for example, who were in charge, who were leaders, who led these monastic orders, and couples and families lived in these monasteries. So they're very, very different from what we might recognise as a monastery today. And that's sort of been brought into the news just recently, because you may recall back in January there was an episode of Digging for Britain where Dr. Andy Seaman, and we were lucky enough to interview Dr. Andy Seaman just as this news was breaking, about the archaeological finds in the grounds of Fonmont Castle, where they found a cemetery, graveyard, if you like, very, very early Christian, lots of quirky things there. So people, all the graves were aligned east to west, which is quite normal for a Christian cemetery of the period. But some of the bodies they found were on their backs, which is normal. Some on their sides, which is not so normal. Some crouched, which is much more associated with pagan burials. So there's lots of things going on there, and there's more of that story going to emerge. The reason why those finds are relevant is because this cemetery, we're all pretty convinced, was part of the monastery at Llancarfan, because it's right on the edges of the old parish boundaries. And also at this cemetery, they found a silo, a kiln for drying out barley. Which is a very unique and unusual thing to find. The design is very unusual and unique, you might think, except they found another one when they were building the 5 Mile Lane, when they straightened the road between Bonvilston and Barry, which is the other side of Llancarfan, again right on the parish boundary. So there's a lot to suggest that these things are connected very much with what was going on. So as these discoveries get, they get analysed and tests are done, we will learn far more about what was going on in Saint Cadoc's abbey at Llancarfan than we could have ever thought possible. It's really remarkable what they found. Most of what we have about the establishment of the abbey, however, are based in some pretty glorious legends, and we've got some amazing stories about it. So there's one fantastic one, which is which talks about Cadoc and how it was he came to establish the monasteries. Now, Cadoc, I should point out, was a real dab hand at miracles. According to legend, even when he was still inside his mother's womb, he is credited with having miraculously filled his parents' cellar with food, and also that a holy well is said to have sprouted from the water he was baptized in, which every now and then ran with wine or milk. So there we go. He's been practicing for a long time, apparently, even from within the womb. Anyway, the legend about how he came to choose Llancarfan as the seat for his great monastery is just as bizarre. So supposedly, one day Cadoc was walking in woods in Glamorgan when a shepherd from an enemy tribe, so it's somebody his father had warred with, recognised him and launched at him with a weapon. Now Cadoc was unarmed, as he was a man of God, and not really a fighting man anyway. So he turned and ran away into the woods, right into the path of an angry wild boar, white with age. The wild boar was as furious as the shepherd and charged at Cadoc. But before impact, it just vanished, as did the shepherd. Realising that it had been spared by God for a purpose, Cadoc marked the spot where this miracle had occurred with 2 sticks, and this was where he chose as the site for the monastery at Llancarfan. So, not just the period in history where Cadoc lived, but the period of history when these accounts were written, obviously the accounts were written by monks. They were very, very religious people, and they interpreted everything that ever happened as somehow being the will of God. So this thing that the wild animals and the enemies of his father are what led him to the place where he would build his abbey. It's got so much symbolism in there. I mean, the boar, for example, is always depicted as a creature of strength and resilience in stories of this period. And the fact that it's white with age also suggests wisdom. There's loads of stuff going on in there. Absolutely remarkable. As is a story about how the abbey got built. So while they were building the abbey, labouring monks reported that 2 stags came from the woods and helped with carrying the timbers and building materials. And from then on, that's why the brook is known as Llancarfan and the church is known as Llancarfan, because that's the church of stags. That's what it translates as. And if you look on the tower of the church, above the weather vane, there is a gold stag to commemorate that. And stags, again, we're talking about imagery. Stags were really important in early Christian imagery. So his cousin, Saint Cadoc, is always pictured with a stag. So is he. There's a story about Saint Cadoc, who made a pact that he would mark off an area of land for poor people to be able to hunt freely on, and instead of walking, he rode on a stag to go around it. So there's lots of stories from sort of 5th, 6th century Welsh early Christian legends which have got stags in them. They seem to be very important. Not altogether sure why. So yeah, quite a remarkable story. Where he really steps up though is once he's got his order established. He has a team of very dedicated monks, including Saint Cadoc, who of course is the saint that Barry is named after, who was also in his order. But he wasn't content with just establishing his abbey in Llancarfan. He travelled extensively, and in Brittany there are several churches dedicated to Saint Cadoc, and I visited one on a place called the Island of Saint Cadoc, or Île de Saint Cadeau in French, which has a holy well where apparently people who bathed in it, it cured them of deafness. And it was a place of pilgrimage for well over 1,000 years. It's really quite extraordinary. And if you ever visit it, when you walk into the chapel, you've got the Breton flag and the Welsh flag hanging side by side, because the people of Brittany completely appreciate that Cadoc and several other saints who established churches over there were Welsh saints, because we Welsh, and in particular the Welsh of the Vale of Glamorgan, because we're talking predominantly about Llancarfan and Llantwit Major. These institutions were Christian long before the majority of Britain was a Christian country, because it's not really until 590 that history deems that England became a Christian country. But of course, we're the best part of 80 years earlier than that, with what was going on down here. So we were kind of in places like Llancarfan and Llantwit Major. That was the hotbed of where Christianity pretty much started for the western side of Britain and France. And you've got people like St. Patrick and St. Finian, who established the church in Ireland, being educated in Llantwit Major, just down the road, as well as the output that came from the monastery in Llancarfan. So that's what makes Cadoc really such an absolutely extraordinary figure. Is you can travel in Ireland, England, Wales, France, and you will find places that he established, and where his history as this Welsh prince is very much celebrated. Now, we've been talking about Saint Cadoc, one of the most remarkable of the Vale of Glamorgan's alumni, a man who took his role as a missionary very seriously, took it right the way across Europe. And we've been hearing some pretty mad legends about when his dad swapped him for a cow. Oh, and by the way, on that, his symbol was the ox as a result of that. So it wasn't a cow, it was an ox. And if you ever visit, there's a shopping centre in Newport, and I can't for the life of me remember what it's called, but in the middle there is this massive statue of an ox, and that's why. It's because it was the symbol of St. Woolas. Anyway, we digress. I've got one more mad legend for you. Now, history tells us this one can't possibly be true, but when you hear the details, it's probably not going to be a surprise. So it's another great legend about St. Cadoc, and also another character from just down the road in Llantwit Major that we've mentioned before, a chap called Illtyd, St. Illtyd. Now, Illtyd, he also had royal heritage, but his path to sainthood was a bit different from Cadoc's. So Cadoc's father had always wanted his son to be a warrior, but Cadoc had disappointed him by dedicating himself to the church. Conversely, Illtyd's family, who we believe were possibly Breton royalty, but it's difficult to be certain, they wanted him to go into the church, but instead he took a wife and committed to a military career, becoming a warrior king. No doubt he wanted to follow in the footsteps of his cousin, and guess who that was? Yeah, King Arthur. So he keeps cropping up, this chap, but yeah, apparently Illtyd's cousin, King Arthur. So one day, Illtyd was leading a hunting party and ventured onto lands belonging to Llancarfan. He sent word to Cadoc demanding hospitality, and Cadoc found the unsolicited request from someone he didn't know rather rude, but he agreed to it and the hunting party arrived at Llancarfan. Before anyone could eat anything, however, the ground opened up and swallowed them up as punishment for their impertinence. Only Illtyd himself survived, and he dropped to his knees before Cadoc, begging forgiveness. Now, Cadoc told him that the only path to absolution was to dedicate his life to God, and realising the wise abbot was right, Illtyd gave up his life of battle and war and became a hermit, only emerging when he believed himself to be pure and absolved of his sins, and able to champion the scriptures, which all seems a bit harsh, as all he wanted to do was invite himself to dinner. Now, everything about that probably isn't true, but the thing that gives it away most of all is that Illtyd actually established his monastery before Cadoc, so it can't possibly be true. A couple of last words on Cadoc. So in the Catholic Church, St. Cadoc to this day is the patron saint of victims of famine, deafness, and glandular disorders. Don't ask. And his feast day is the 25th of September. And supposedly he was killed or martyred defending religious relics from a raiding party of Saxon warriors. Them! What are they up to? Now, 25th of September, we're going to... Here's a thing you can get involved with. So St. Cadoc's feast day is the 25th of September. One of St. Cadoc's disciples was St. Barrack, and his feast day is the 27th of September, which just so happens to be a Friday. So I am planning a pilgrimage walk that starts at what was the abbey, but is now the church of Llancarfan. and covers the roughly 5 miles, I think it is, 5 or 6 miles. I should have been a bit more prepared for this. Yeah, let's go for 6 then. So it's the 6 miles from Llancarfan to Barry Island, where St Barrack's Chapel and Well are. And I'm planning on doing it on Friday the 27th of September. So keep your ear to the ground, because I'll be doing more with this, and I plan on getting in contact with the local churches and the local councils to see if they want to do anything as part of it. But yeah, a pilgrimage walk on Friday the 27th of September. Now, before all of that, I've got some very exciting things to announce. So right the way through May, June and July, I'm hosting the Glamorgan History Walks. And the Glamorgan History Walks basically are a series of walks for various abilities. You know, you don't have to be somebody who always, you know, is a billy goat on weekends. There are some short walks, some long walks, but all of them take you around sites of historic interest right the way across the Vale of Glamorgan, Bridgend area, and so on. Now, I'll tell you the ones that are most relevant to listeners by year. So on Saturday the 11th of May, there's one that begins outside the Cross in Llantywydd Major, Old Town, then takes in the Castle Ditches, Tresillian Bay, and then comes back into the town. So that's on Saturday the 11th of May. On Sunday the 12th of May, there's one that begins on Barry Island, takes in what we just discussed, funnily enough, you know, the relics of St Barrack's hermitage up on the island, then drops down to the Nap and the Roman remains, and then goes to Porthkerry Park. Then also in our area, so Saturday 18th of May, there's one that starts in Monknash and takes in Nash Point, St Donat's Castle, St Donat's Church. And on the 27th of May, St Athan, East Orchard Castle, Gileston. Or Gilliston, sorry, me and my pronunciations. And also within the coverage area of Bro Radio, Saturday the 13th of July, there's one in Dinas Powys taking in the Cwm George, also the Iron Age Hill Fort and the Salmon Leaps. If you want to get more information on these walks, if you go to www.glamwalks.co.uk, you will find information on all of them. There are 15 in all. If you go to that site, you'll have all the walks listed out in a calendar. You like the look of one of them, just click on the walk and it'll tell you what history topics will come up, what places we will visit, how long the walk is, what to look out for, as well as a map, everything that you need to help you conclude that this is a wonderful way of spending a weekend, especially as every one of these walks ends at a nice pub where we can get refreshments and food and basically have a laugh about what it is that we've just done. So what a full and packed programme we've had, ladies and gentlemen. Please bearing in mind that from now on, these programmes are going out on a Wednesday, not a Monday. And always the fourth Wednesday of the month. So in April, that is the 24th. So yeah, that is it. Yeah, let's go with 24th is a Wednesday, yes. So the fourth Wednesday of the month next month, 24th of April. I really look forward to seeing you then. Until then, look after yourselves. Thank you. Goodbye.